Okay, all right. You've landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith, back for another week here. Your 5-2 San Francisco 49ers will be welcoming the 3-3 Cincinnati Bengals to the Bay this Sunday afternoon. And boy, is this a big one for the 49ers, especially given that they've lost two in a row. The Cincinnati Bengals have won two in a row and feel a little bit like they're hitting their stride. Not entirely just yet. Big gap to make up based on the way that the season started. So let's just dive right into it. We're about, 360, 19, about 18 and a half hours, 19 hours from kickoff at this point. As I mentioned, big game, big week. Feel like this could be defined as a must-win game for the San Francisco 49ers, especially heading into the bye week. And then the schedule gets tough from there. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the back half of the show. So let's look at the tail of the tape. And certainly I welcome your questions and comments throughout this evening's show, if you will. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. Anybody who's listened to me in the past knows I'm not a huge stat guy, right? I like to watch tape. I like to just kind of react on what my eyes tell me. But that being said, let's kind of look at some statistics here for just a moment. So a couple things to consider. If I look at PFF rankings overall, and these rankings tell entirely different stories. Overall, 49ers are ranked second. The Bengals are ranked 27th. On the offensive side of the ball, the 49ers are ranked fourth. Bengals ranked 23rd. On the defensive side of the ball, 49ers are ranked first, and the Bengals are ranked 27th. Then if you get into like power rankings, overall, the 49ers are third. Bengals are ninth. On the defensive side, 49ers are first. On the offensive side, they're 19th. For the Bengals on defense, they're 19th. On the offensive side, they're sixth. So I feel like those power rankings tell a little bit of a different story and tell a little bit how close these teams really are. If you recall, the last time these teams faced was in Cincinnati. It was during the 2021 season. 49ers were up 14 points heading into the fourth quarter and gave up that lead. This game went to overtime. Brandon Ayuk made a fantastic play in overtime to win the game. So that's the last time these teams faced. 49ers came out on top on the road. We know what the rest of the season brought for the 49ers as they made a run to the NFC Championship. So did the Cincinnati Bengals. In fact, they made that run all the way to the Super Bowl and beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship. So very talented teams squaring off. I know the record is alarming for, I guess, the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Over the last few years, they've been far more dominant than the start of this season would suggest. But obviously, Joe Burrow's been nicked up. It took a little while for Jamar Chase to hit the stride, finally finding the end zone right before their bye week 3 times in a game for all 3 touchdowns that he's had this season. So big thing to consider here, Cincinnati is coming off of their bye week, so an extra week to prepare for this game, and the 49ers are reeling a little bit. 2 straight losses. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. You've heard a lot this week on the bashing of Steve Wilkes and the performance of this defense. You've heard a lot about how Brock Purdy might not necessarily be the quarterback of the future, especially coming out of that Minnesota game with the 2 late interceptions. I'm going to start with the Brock Purdy story here. There's nothing that he's put on tape right now to tell you that he's not the guy of the future. Has there been some concerns? Yeah, sure. As there should be with a guy who hasn't even started, a full regular season slate of games yet. I know as poor as he played in Cleveland, he still put them in a position to win his team in a position to win the football game. At the end of that game with a missed field goal. The 49ers still found themselves in a spot to potentially go down and win the game against Minnesota, and Brock threw that late interception. I'm never going to fault a guy for being aggressive and feeling like he's got to go win the game. But does Brock need to win the game? Probably not, right? If he's playing within the confines of the offense, he really probably just needs to not turn the ball over, convert a long third down a couple times throughout the game just to keep the ball moving and keep your team able to go ahead and run the football, right? These are things that, based on the talent around him, he doesn't have to go and be the superhero. But he's had some superhero type moments in his career so far, which have been a lot of fun to watch. But in this game, he's got to play within the confines in the offense, right? We have to limit the turnovers. You want to win the turnover battle against a good team like Cincinnati, who's currently hitting their stride right now. But let's just dispel that. Like, I'm not saying Brock is the guy. I'm just saying you can't sit here and say that he's not the guy. There's just not enough tape. There's not enough history behind the guy and his performance, because if you want to point to the history without recency bias, guy's won a lot of football games so far in his professional career, more than most rookies and quarterbacks who might have started their first 15, 16 games in the NFL. Significantly more he's won than some of those other ones that probably are like in Hall of Fame contention, etc. Again, I'm trying to puff this guy up a little bit, get him ready for this game. I know they talked about there was a scare that he wasn't going to play this week. Obviously, late on the flight home after the Minnesota game, concussion symptoms started to creep up, had to go through the protocol, got cleared today. Here we are. For all intents and purposes, he's going to start. And then you want to ask yourself, okay, well, like, when did the symptoms really creep up? Did they contribute to that late game interception against Minnesota? Neither here nor there. What I need to see from Brock is, with this injury, and we've seen him play through injury before, got to flush it. Just got to flush it. You just got to flush everything that's being said around you. You know, as long as your team and your coaching staff has confidence in you, nothing else matters. Go in, play your brand of football, play team ball, and the rest inevitably should take care of itself. So let's talk about the other thing around the defense. And Steve Wilks getting dragged through the mud this week, and it really all does boil down to that cover zero, heavy blitz right at the end of the first half. That, you know, if Mooney makes that pick, we're probably never even having this conversation. We're not even talking about a 49er loss, but we are. And didn't make the play, and Jordan Addison takes it to the end zone, and that was kind of a back-breaking play in this game. But we want to drag Wilks through the mud. But this is what happens in the NFL. If players don't execute the call that are made, or the plays that are called, then of course the coach staff's going to look bad, right? So, like, is it really Steve Wilks, or is it really, hey, they're just not executing the last few weeks, and candidly not executing all that well throughout the entire season? I know statistically you want to believe that the 49ers defense is top ranked, but the truth is, go watch the tape, and they're not, right? They're getting gashed against the run. When have we seen a 49ers team that is stronger against the pass than they are against the run? That's not the norm by any means, at least in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era, where we've seen Saleh and Ryans and now Wilks as the defensive coordinators. And then they want to point to the lack of production from the defensive line. When I say production, I mean sacks, right? Showing up in the stat column, finishing the play, etc. It's fair to assume that teams are scheming. And then you hear some frustration from some of the players, whether direct or indirect or subliminal or not, of this isn't the same defense. And we thought Steve Wilks would be coming in and calling the same defense. Well, that's kind of naive. I'm sure he didn't say that in his interview with Kyle Shanahan. Sure, he said, hey, I've been around this league a lot. I've been a head coach. I think I have some new wrinkles that's going to take this team to the top. And maybe it hasn't come to fruition. I'm erring on the side of just giving them the benefit of the doubt that, like, with new coordinators, sometimes it takes a little bit more time to gel and let that scheme, sink in. But this week feels like it needs to be redemption week for what's taken place over the last 2 weeks. And again, we want to drag the defense, but 22 points against the Vikings, 19 points against the Cleveland Browns. In the NFL, sometimes that's more than good enough to win. And candidly speaking, that was good enough to put the team in position to potentially win a game in these last two losses. So I'm not dragging the defense. I think there needs to be better efficiency. They're taking more of this, like, bend, don't break. Like, seems like they're okay giving up yardage, and okay getting off the field with, maybe giving up 3 points, etc. That could be considered wins against this offense, against the Bengals. I know they've only had really one, like, significant outburst offensively, and that was 2 weeks ago. Last week they played the Seahawks, put up 17 points or 16 or 17 points, but that was enough to win the football game. So their defense played well, or Seattle's offense played poorly. Depends on how you want to look at it. That was game flow, but In this game, one area that the San Francisco 49ers need to be significantly better is they need to get off the field on third downs. Period, point blank. There was a lot of third and longs against the Minnesota Vikings, and they were not able to get off the field. It actually very much so reminded me of like the 2002 playoff game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the divisional round, where the year the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. It was 2001 season, 2002 postseason. I just remember vividly watching that game and the 49ers just literally not being able to get off the ball on third down. And it ended up being a lambasting by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that was it. I mean, their defense played so well on first and second down, just could not for the life, whether it was a penalty, a chunk play, whatever it was, they just couldn't get off the field. And that's what it felt like watching that Minnesota Viking game. Like, God, for the love of God, if you get one, maybe two stops, the outcome looks entirely different. You take momentum away. Can't happen against this Cincinnati Bengals offense. Can't give them any opportunity to hang around, because as Burrow and Chase, get back in their groove and Burrow starts to get a little bit healthier, which you have to assume he is coming off the bye week, it's going to make you pay for that. So you got to get off the ball on third down. Some other things that I'm looking at when I'm like kind of judging the opponent. So far this season, the Cincinnati Bengals are averaging 16.7 points per game and giving up roughly 21 points per game. They're averaging under 200 yards passing per game, and they're averaging under 70 yards rushing per game. So the offense has not been splashy, has not been flashy. It will. Eventually they will catch their stride, right? I just mentioned this is a team that has played in the AFC Championship 2 consecutive seasons. So we got some questions here. I'll bring back up the first one, right? There's been a lot of commentary about poor calls in the NFL. Sure has. How do you win those games as good teams? Yeah, it's simple. It's a really simple formula. There's been poor officiating since the league's existence. It's never been perfect. It's imperfect in every single professional sport. You do your best as a team to ensure that the officiating doesn't even have the opportunity to dictate the outcome of a game. And I know that's hard because these officials love to influence games and, stick their nose in there at the end in inopportune times. Just go out there and execute and play your brand of football, and it won't be an issue. When you start worrying about penalties and how the refs are influencing games, you're worried about that because the game's too close. It's a sloppy game, and the team's probably hanging around that shouldn't have been in the first place. Go out there and play fundamental football, and you should not have to worry about the officiating, even when it does creep up. Great question. Another thing to consider about the Bengals is they have no glaring injuries coming into this game, while the 49ers are a little bit more nicked up. We already know Debo's not going to suit up. Trent Williams, I'm assuming, is going to be a game time decision, but I'm willing to bet that he probably doesn't suit up for this game. We didn't know till a couple hours ago whether it was going to be Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold starting for this game. Is Dre Greenlaw a little bit more healthy than he was last week, where he felt like he was just playing a little bit slower, a little out of sync? Things to consider. We're almost at the halfway point of the season where all teams are playing banged up, but for all intents and purposes, coming out of the bye week, Cincinnati Bengals are looking pretty darn healthy. It's a good opponent. It's a good opponent coming to town in a game that fans and players and coaching staff alike and ownership are probably sitting here like, gosh darn it, we need to win this football game. You do not want to go into your bye week and then having to travel on the road after the bye week with that sour taste in your mouth. You have the ability to right this wrong. Here's the other thing. What if, Seattle wins this week and the 49ers lose? Well, 49ers are no longer and control of the NFC, which they don't have. They're not even in control of the NFC West at this point. Seattle would take over that jockeying in that position. So there's a lot at stake in this game, even if it is a little bit under halfway through the season, that the 49ers need to be concerned about. But they need to flush all of that. They need to get out of their own heads. I talked about them when I was on the show earlier this week with Steph on the 49K podcast. Shout out to you, Steph. Always appreciate you having me on. that I felt like the 49ers were starting to read their own headlines, looking at their own press clippings a little too much and drinking a little too much of the office Kool-Aid. I don't know, whatever term you want to use. A little too much self-belief and self-confidence, and maybe lost that spunk a little bit about like, hey, we got to go out there and we got to earn these W's. This is the NFL. You have to earn every inch, every yard, every win. There's just too much parity in this league. We see it all the time. See it all the time in football, where the underdog just takes advantage of the heavily favored team, because the heavily favored team might have fallen asleep at the wheel, might have overlooked the game, might have thought talent alone would win the football game. Definitely not going to be the case this weekend. I can tell you, I don't care what the records say. This is going to be the toughest test this defense has seen. And Kirk Cousins lit you up on Monday Night Football. So you better be prepared to play. Worried to see if Trent hangs it up next season. Yeah, this is a real concern. He's been vocal about this, not necessarily that like next year is the year. I do think it's going to be predicated on what taste is left in his mouth based on how the team performs this year or what expectations they reach. But for all intents and purposes, Trent is getting towards he's in the back nine of his career, and he's getting towards the end. And we've been really spoiled for the last 19 years, essentially. Well, am I doing the right math? 18 years at the left tackle position between Joe Staley and what he meant to this team for all those years. And then in Joe Staley's retirement, bringing in Trent Williams, right? That's a big gap along this offensive line that they might need to look and fill in short order. But let's not think about that just yet. Let's focus on the 2023 season, Trent's health, his longevity, and hopefully he's able to at least finish the season and the 49ers are able to achieve those great heights that they expect. Let's talk about keys to victory here this week. Simple formula. Usually is in the NFL. It really usually is a very simple formula to find yourself on the winning side of the equation in this league. For the 49ers, it's probably even more simple than you would expect. I have 4 things that I would want this team to focus on that I think would get the job done. First and foremost, it's paramount. I said it last week. They got away from it. Run the football. Period. Point blank. The Cincinnati Bengals are giving up 142.8 yards per game on the ground. Go get some. Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, who's ever got their hands on the football, this is your best opportunity to date against a weaker run defense. So what does that mean? Cincinnati Bengals are going to come in and do everything they can to stop the run. It's just that simple, right? No Debo. I'm sure they're worried about the passing game a little bit, right? I mean, Brock's been more than serviceable. The receivers have been productive when they're there, but no Debo slows things down a little bit. Run the football. Do not get cute. Do not abandon the run just because you have confidence in your quarterback. Control the time of possession. I mentioned also on Steph's show that we can no longer refer to what the San Francisco 49ers do as bully ball. This might be the week you can go ahead and take a little bit of that back. Run the football. I don't know how many times I can say that. Number 2, another obvious statement here. You got to win the turnover battle. Lost it against Minnesota. It's not just win the turnover battle, capitalize on the turnover battle. What have we talked about? What's happened? We saw Mooney Ward picked off Kirk Cousins real early on their first possession last game against the Minnesota Vikings, and it ended up being a Christian McCaffrey fumble, no points, 0-0 wash. You punch that in there on a really, really short field and go up 7-0. I'm telling you, the game just takes a totally different complexion. Saw this against Cleveland Browns. Fred Warner picks off a pass, brings it deep into their territory. A couple penalties and stupid plays later, we're attempting a long field goal. You miss it. You put that in the box. 14-0, right? Game just takes a different turn. Have to take advantage of the turnovers when you get them. They need to become points, ideally touchdowns. And that's how you win football games. Number 3, There's got to be redemption for the defensive line. You've been hearing it for all season. You've been hearing it big time this past week. Get to the quarterback. Get to the quarterback. Joe Burrow is not going to kill you with his legs. He's serviceable with his legs, but he's not going to present the same problems that we have seen from mobile quarterbacks in the past. He's just not that guy. But you have to be in his face, period, point, blank, hard stop. Need to finish. I don't want to hear about PFF's pressures, etc. Need to sack the quarterback. Early downs would be preferred. Put them in third and longs, and let's see what happens, and put a little pressure against them. But Joe Burrow's done a really good job this season getting the ball out quick, and that seems to be kryptonite well, it is kryptonite for most defensive lines, specifically this. But they need to get after Chris Kasurek. I'm looking at you. You're starting to get dragged into these conversations along with Steve Wilks. They need to get home. It's very simple. They need to get home. Fourth and final point here is just limit the big plays. I told you how Burrow and Chase are hitting their stride a little bit. Just no chunk plays. You can give up yardage. You can do all of that. You can bend, not break, but you can't be giving up 50, 60-yard touchdowns to this team. They're loaded with talent on the offensive side of the ball. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Burrow at quarterback, Joe Mixon at running back. They got weapons just like our offense has weapons. And their wide receiver core, frankly, is better. And they're going to look to take advantage of it. And they like to push the ball down the field. Jamar Chase is a difference maker down the field. T. Higgins is very good down the field. They're going to look to push it. And you're right. If they're taking shots deep downfield, takes a little time for those plays to build up. That's not a 2-second release. Get after the quarterback, sack a Rooney, Nick Bosa, right? Like that's what it needs to boil down to. Last thing, we'll get out of here. Something to keep an eye on. The last time these two teams met, George Kittle caught 13 balls for 150 yards and 151 yards and a touchdown. I would look to see if when they're not running the ball, I expect George Kittle to be a significant part of this passing game this week. I don't think they have. The defense looks very similar. I mean, they're minus some stud safeties that have departed from the team. It's there to be taken by 85. Just telling you, this is a game that lines up real well for him. Matchups that he will get throughout the game. So that's kind of George Kittle will be my X factor in this game. I would expect, 13 catches for 151 yards and a touchdown is like a significant performance. Do I expect him to repeat that? No, definitively not. But I do expect him to be heavily involved in the passing game. So I feel like you check those 4 boxes. Run the football, run the football, run the football. I just said that 4 times and you'll win this football game. Win the turnover battle. That's obvious. That goes for both teams. Totally get it. Pressure on the quarterback. Disrupt Joe Burrow. Get him out of his flow. Do not let him build that chemistry throughout the game with his wide receivers. Going to be in a better position to win the game. And then just the big plays. Definition of a big play, I said 40, 50, 60-yard, runs, completions. Don't want them going for touchdowns. But if you need a visual, the play before halftime from Kirk Cousins to Jordan Addison for the Minnesota Vikings. Can't have that. Just can't have that in this game. Got to give your defense an opportunity to hold them to 3, force a turnover, whatever it might be. This defense is very turnover optimistic, right? They do get after the ball. They are always punching at the ball, stripping at the ball. They'll take gambles, those D-backs, to get step in front of a pass. So that with Mooney Ward, should have had 2, had 1. They all looked exactly the same. Just stepped in front of the ball. He out-muscled one time, got out-muscled the second time. So we check those boxes. 49ers should win this football game, but it's going to be a tight football game. It's going to come all the way down to the end. But either way, it's going to be which team does those things better. Score prediction, 24-21 San Francisco 49ers. I think the 49ers are 3.5-point favorites, 24-21. I'll give them the 3-point W. I don't know how that's going to slice out. I do not want it to come down to Jake Moody kicking a game-winning field goal. I don't know if my heart can handle that stress. But why do I think the 49ers got to win this football game? Because they have to win this football game. That's it. Simple. Have to win this football game. Do not want to go into your bye week losing 3 in a row. Have a little momentum, something that can carry you through the bye week, something that you can build off of, because the tough stretch comes from there. How tough? Well, let's talk about it. When they return, we're looking at Jacksonville Jaguars on the road. After Jacksonville, then they welcome in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then they're on the road at Seattle, on the road at Philadelphia, and then back home against Seattle. It's a tough slate, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive games. They get a little buffer in there with Arizona. Don't know if Kyler Murray's back, etc. And then on Christmas Eve or Christmas night, I wanted to say Christmas evening, but I said Christmas Eve instead. Home against the Baltimore Ravens. Schedule does not get easy in the back half here. This is a must-win football game. I don't know how else to say it. Must win. So, again, this is ISLAND49. Check it out. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe. We really appreciate everybody's support. Love when you tune in. Love your questions, your commentary. This is an open forum. I'll put your comments up on the screen all day long. I'll engage with you all day long. But until then, we'll start the show. We'll end the show the same way we always start the show, and that's Go Niners.